silence before the orchestra starts.
I know we are live. So, welcome, welcome to all of you. And I'm so glad to be here and with my beautiful friend Sarah. And we have similar interests and passions and maybe focuses of work. So I thought we should have a conversation about why we're passionate about what we do, how we got to it, right? It's usually part of our self-care and what we bring to people, what our journey has been and why we bring that to people. So, Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. It's so nice to be here with you. And I think the sun came out because it knew we were going to talk. And so I'm having a beautiful sunny day. It's been cold. People think I'm in Mexico, and people think, oh, Mexico, it must be, beach weather all the time. But I'm in the mountains and the rainforest, and so sometimes it gets freezing cold down to like 50 degrees, and we're all shivering in our homes. But today the sun did come out. So perspective, right? It's all a question of perspective, and I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you, Padma. So much of our lives are um, you know we have so many things that intertwine, and it's been so wonderful to be cultivating this friendship. So thank you for
Yeah,
the invitation.
yeah. And so one of the we both have parents from different cultures, right? I have a Mexican father and a Dutch, or not Dutch, Swedish Danish lineage mother. And I can't remember your
I
specific.
have a Mexican father also, and a Jewish Irish mother from California.
Right. Right. My mom's from Montana. So just even that is really interesting because I think when you're from two different cultures, you're constantly straddling. You don't fit into one or the other,
Or you fit into both
or you fit into both.
in some ways.
Yeah, in some ways. In some ways, depending on who's who you're talking to. But it is interesting. I mean, I grew up in an all Hispanic neighborhood. I lived in mostly Hispanic neighborhoods until I was 20.
Mm.
So even though I was very fair, it's like my comfortability in a white culture it took me a long time.
Mm.
Felt really different.
And for me, it was so interesting being middle class in Mexico, and then moving to the US when to finish high school and go to college. And suddenly, every single day, being confronted by what was my identity, and always being asked, what are you? Not where are you from? No, what are you? That was like the constant question. People were very forward about it. What are you? So, because my curly hair confused everybody. And so I would say, oh, I'm Mexican. And you know what they would say, Padma? No, you're not Mexican. So
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I know. I get that. I still get that. They must have been northern Mexico. It's like, yeah, they were. Um,
But
and the other thing that we both have a passion for, and I don't know, I mean, part of me feels like that got sparked from just all the culture that I was exposed to, but art and dance, movement.
absolutely.
So
That
I know you're more of a performer, is that right? And you have studied dance and performed dance. Um, I have studied and been more of a closet hider dancer. Not as confident. I did perform maybe once or twice, but there's something about dance and the expression of it and the passion of it.
hmm Yes. Yes, dance and music. Um, I was always finding ways to be performing when I was little. and always, yeah, just loved to move. And then later, much later, discovered I could sing and that I loved singing. So now
Mm.
I kind of do both.
Yeah, that's something we also share. I also love to sing and
Mm.
chant. And so that's the other element that we share is yoga,
Yes.
right? And that is movement, but there's also a spiritual element to that, or a mindful or philosophical, or however, there's many different ways to move into that. Devotional, right? There's different ways of that practice of expressing through those practices.
Hmm. Yes. Yes.
And and then working with others with their body, right? Supporting others in their movement journey and finding um, embodiment, for lack of a better word, but finding who they are in their body, right?
Mm.
Through movement,
Mm.
right? Whether it's a lower back that doesn't feel, or a shoulder, an injury, right? That it becomes a way to get closer to your own physicality, your body, your expression of you
Hmm.
in this
Yeah.
form.
And I think, we've mentioned this, that our approach is also going to be, even if the problem seems to be in the lower back, or that's not, something where that's crying out for attention, we look at the whole person, right? From multiple perspectives, whether you were mentioning, right? Whether it's looking at emotions or whether it's looking at how the whole system is maybe out of balance or misaligned, or perhaps there's a disconnect between the way I'm thinking and the way I'm moving. So bridging those gaps, and I think our, we both would agree, harmony of all the aspects of ourselves would be a wonderful aim.
Yeah. And I do, and I know we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but just how we, right, why we were drawn to all of these things, why we were drawn to movement, why we were drawn to yoga, why we were drawn to just the therapeutic quality of
Mhm.
movement. Like what, and I can say, um, for myself, I was drawn to gymnastics and movement. I just liked being very free and fluid in my body up to a certain age. And then I got really, really insecure, like incredibly insecure. And I didn't want people looking at me. And that kind of shifted the way that I did. Like I uh, took a class in college, a dance class, and for the final, we were supposed to do a performance. And I was so terrified of performing that I just stopped going to the class. And then it was years later that I went back to a class and eventually did a performance. And that was kind of my way of working through all of that fear. But there is just something about, for me, movement as when my mind can't figure something out, when when I don't understand my emotions fully, I move and I dance, because dance feels more expressive. I mean, going for a walk is amazing, but there's something about dance that allows you to move from the inside out. And then yoga became a way really to heal my body, because I had shattered my elbow, and they basically said you'd never really use your arm again. It was in yoga where I was able to integrate my arm into my body and move again, and not just move, but move really well and do, I could do handstands and headstands um and not that that was the goal, but it really allowed me to express through my body again and not feel so broken.
Mhm.
And I love sharing that.
So
And
inspiring. Shattered elbow.
yeah. Yeah, and then I think the yoga part also helped me find just peace with my own self, peace with my heart, peace with my mind, peace with my history and all the challenges that had had happened in life, and just really gave me a tool to move through it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's part of, right, this self-care then becomes like, oh, these are really amazing tools, and I know how to hold space with them for others. I think that's what we do as practitioners, right? We learn for ourselves and then we share.
Yeah. Yeah, and I found yoga when I was training as a dancer, and I did a whole I have my whole degree in dance, and I mean a very rigorous dance program, and then I was living in New York City and auditioning and performing, and that was super challenging. And then yoga started to become this huge thing, and everybody started doing yoga, and I discovered that I could stay in shape, that this could be a way of training that wasn't so depleting as all the rigorous dance training I was doing previously. So that's how I found yoga. Some injuries, fortunately not fortunately not something I was going to say as serious, but serious because it was chronic, just chronic pain and tension and low back and hips. And through practicing yoga, it was a way of giving myself also a pause and a break. And for the longest time, for years, I was not interested in teaching at all. It really was very clearly my practice for me, for nurturing myself. And I just had so much resistance to teaching. And then what happened was I was here in Mexico, and I had a wonderful teacher, and I loved going to my class. And then suddenly she announced she was moving out of town, and she said, "But Sara, you could take the group." This was so many years ago. And it was that moment where the opportunity presented itself for me to actually start teaching, and then to discover how much I actually do enjoy it, and how much of my creativity can be expressed in my classes also.
Mm. Oh, I love when you say your name. It just made me want to say Sara Robledo. Rob, say it so I can say it. Robledo.
Yeah,
You gotta warm up the tongue because English is very tongue neutral.
right. I
Sara
wonder what effect that
Robledo.
has on our psyche.
To have a tongue, a neutral tongue.
Neutral tongue. Everything's connected in your body, so.
True, true. There, yes. There are, right, there are studies that, right, the Hispanics touch more.
Well, there you go, because we roll our R's.
We have to move our whole body just to roll our R's. Um, and it's funny because my birth name is Patricia Borrego. And so it's similar in that it takes thought. And so my name has been butchered my whole life.
My name too, because my second last name is Waters, because of my mother. And in Mexico, we use both last names, right? So I am Sara Robledo Waters.
What there's
Yeah, so I can relate to that. Yes.
very interesting.
So, Padma, tell me more. You were sharing with me a little bit about your work and where it's evolving to.
Um, so, well, I guess in this moment in time, what I feel very passionate about is I think more of the embodiment part. And again, that is such a hard word to use because people say embodiment practices. And I'm like, I spent years doing yoga and not fully in my body. So just doing yoga doesn't mean that we're in knowing what we need, because yoga is also very directive, right? There is this still, um, I mean, I think this is an interesting part about movement practices is that there is a lot of kind of pushing and striving, especially when you're doing like a serious, yoga in New York City was intense. A lot of pushing, and I got a lot of injuries from it. Um,
A term we use just as a little aside in the Alexander technique that describes perfectly what you're talking about, which is end gaining.
yes, exactly. Yeah, end range. There's always an achievement to be done. And I think that it can be helpful, but it's a double-edged sword, right? So I guess what I see is helping people find the nuance or find the journey or find their breath or find why, or like, what does it feel like? Like that becomes more interesting to me. It's like, yes, we can rehabilitate your shoulder, but there's so many layers to this. It's like, how did the body get disorganized, right? Because we need to know how to find center. What's balanced? Like, can you feel it? Do you even know what it feels like? What's your experience of it? What's your relationship, and how do we get there? Because it's often not getting back there. It's like an introduction to, or back there because we knew it as a child.
Mhm.
But then how do we kind of touch back into that?
Right. And then I love what you're saying. And so I got certified in the Alexander technique
Mhm.
in my search and many, many things that I tried. And so I think that the perspective that it's given me is of the psychophysical unity,
Mhm.
that you can't separate body and mind.
Mhm.
And every action, we take, whether it's here I am taking a little bit of water, it's both physical and mental and spiritual, right? And we can't divide any part of ourselves. And so when there is like a shoulder injury, yes, the therapeutic, you know, it's calling for perhaps a special attention, and I would never deny that. But then it's of course so interesting to also do that um, self-inquiry. What happened, and what how can I change? The opportunities that I see with injuries is that they make us stop. And they're really oftentimes, unfortunately, the only thing that will um, make us stop and that will encourage us to find a different way because of the end gaining push that we're under. There's no motivation otherwise to do things differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I thoroughly, and I think that's what we see as practitioners, is that people come in. I love your word divided. It's like there is that division. There is this, my body is not, it's something else other than my mind, right? Or other than my heart, or other than my desires. And it's like, well, the body is,
Miscon-
it is consciousness. We've been taught that it's not, but it is. And that relational kind of bringing people back into relationship with their body and even their desires. I mean, I definitely see people coming with injuries, but it's so much more. There's so much more, yes, that they have to stop. And there can be a lot of resistance and feeling like the body's betraying them or not doing what it should be doing. But it really is like, are we doing what we should be doing or what we want to be doing? Are we aligned with our desires? And I often see that helping people find that softness towards themselves, towards their body, towards their own, that there's room for such a bigger growth, a
Yes.
bigger opening.
Yes. And I also, I think about the body wisdom that is, can we can awaken it, that, might not be available if we're very disconnected. And so, now more and more we're talking and discovering, the neurons in the heart and in the digestive system, right? And all the wisdom that can come from listening, listening with all parts of ourselves, right? So many times we really have the answers already within us. It is just a question of listening.
Yeah. And big answers, even the simple things like I feel really uncomfortable in this conversation, or I feel uncomfortable around this person, or, when I go to work, I feel tired or I feel disconnected. Like those are all our bodies saying, can you pay attention? Or can you at least ask me what I'm feeling?
Yes. Yes.
Hey, I had something to say.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes. So I walk and my back hurts, or
right,
yes.
right, right. Yeah, and it's really interesting working with people over a period of time because you get to see, oh, my back went out again. It's like, okay, well, what happened? Like, what's going on? What else is going on? Um, or and there's we start to see the patterns. Like I think that we can reflect back to people even as we're working with the body, even as we're trying to kind of build intelligence in movement, because I think these bottom up approaches, like different than therapy, where we're trying to analyze our thoughts and our feelings, and sometimes again intention and manifestation, or we're still trying to direct, and that there's something about moving, shifting the nervous system from a non-mental space, from a physical space, from a movement space, or realigning the body from that space, or reconnecting to felt sense. And what did you say the word was?
Psychophysical unit.
Psychophysical, right? That connection comes from movement, that we need the bottom up, from the body up, from the nervous system up, from touch up to the other centers, and from the brain down, that we need both.
Mm-hmm.
That working with the body over time and the reflection, like reflecting back to people when they have a harder time deciphering, is so, I don't know, it's very fulfilling.
Yes, yes, yes. So we've been working in class on connective tissue and fascia.
Mm,
And so it turns out that it's a system that's older than the nervous system,
mm,
and that the information travels 3 times faster than in the nervous system. And I love the idea that connective tissue connects everything to everything. So I think it's so poetic. I think it's so spiritual to also, be working on that level.
mm,
And and it's not just about, oh, I need to loosen up, like with, I need to loosen this up because it's tight, but that why is this happening? And there is like an awareness at the body level that I might not have access to just through my thoughts, right? And there's something coming through, that if I'm only trying to, I often see some students that it's such a challenge to get out of their minds, you know, because they want to figure it all out. And some things are at the level of the body are perhaps beyond words, and it's an experience. So that those are some of the things that I'm
Oh, I love that.
planning.
I love the fascial system too, and I love your that it is the connection of all, right? That it's connective tissues everywhere. So it's our skin, it's the wrapping around each muscle fiber and muscle groups and bones becoming ligaments and yeah, this around the cell, and it's such a vast network of communication, right? That
Yes.
our body is a highly, highly, highly intelligent, refined organism.
Yes, one of my teachers says, there's over 600 muscles in the group, depending on how you would classify them. How in the world do you think that you would, your brain could orchestrate, this amazing 600 player symphony orchestra? And so there is, also that let's get out a little bit of trying to control it all.
Mhm.
And if we stop interfering, then the body intelligence, that innate body intelligence you were talking about, when we all, hopefully most of us, had as babies, we can stop interfering, then it does come back. I really believe it can come back. With it's not that we want to move again as we did as babies, that wouldn't be even possible, but we can stop a lot of the interference that we've done. And with, it seems contradictory because it's getting out of our heads and at the same time bringing a different kind of awareness to what we're
Yeah,
doing.
absolutely. Yeah, and when you're talking about the shoulder, it's like, yes, it isn't about just the shoulder. It's like, well, why is the shoulder tight? Like when you move the shoulder, what is it related to? Does your breath stop? Does your, right, does your hip start to pull? Do you shift your weight? Do you, it's like what, because it's a whole body. It's an integrated symphony, not just a shoulder that's misbehaving and everything else is fine. There's something, there's a reason why there's stress in one place. And it's not always where the issue is, right? It's like, you know, sometimes even just slowing things down so you can feel, yeah, I'm gripping, I'm holding my breath. I don't like moving my weight over there. Or when I move my arm, I feel like it's pulling in my back heart. It's like there's so many things.
The habits,
Oh,
right?
so many habits, but also just like things that we've learned through time, right? Little little moments of like bracing that we've kind of integrated into our body patterns. And
Yes.
I also love because I think, if we think of how many years we spent in a non-cognitive, non-verbal place, it was pretty long, probably 7 years that we were just kind of in this very amorphous place. We're just taking in information and moving with it, but we're not, analyzing things and aware of we're just having our emotions. We're not, um, we haven't fully learned how to shut them down yet or how to express them. And that the movement really, yes, helps us to connect back to that place of moving it through us,
Mm-hmm.
or learning how to integrate from movement, or
Mm-hmm. The
stopping
movement or
time,
with
or breath,
breath. Yes.
or crying, or running around and yelling,
Or being still,
or
which
being
is
still,
also a thing in and of itself. Yes.
or laying on somebody's lap to feel safe,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
or
Yes.
movement in community or in connection with somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this part about being still also,
Mm.
so I often think about, yoga being a system to prepare people for stillness, for meditation, right? So we do all this movement so that we can be still. And it's interesting because most of us are spending so much time not moving enough, kind of staying sunk in our chairs and stiffening in one posture that is also a reflection of our emotions and our thoughts, the way we're holding ourselves. And yes.
The mind is still going.
Yes, and then but try to sit on the floor and meditate for 5 minutes, and most people would run away, right? So I think things are like backwards. I was telling one of my students the other day, she just had a major surgery. She came out very well, a major hip surgery. And we were having a session, and she was sharing, oh yes, after, so I was in class, and it was so difficult to get up after the 2-hour class. And so I stopped her and I said, nobody should be sitting for 2 hours. Also, you and I, we should give ourselves a little break.
A little stretching break.
Nobody should be still and sitting and expected to then be able to, feel amazing after 2 hours of sitting. We should all be moving so much more. So super basic, but she promised that she would set up an alarm somehow to, this is, something that seems so simple, and yet do we really do it? Or do we force ourselves to not move because there's a 2-hour or 3-hour conference call that we have to be very professional and stay still for? So I think we are asking so much out of our bodies, and yet giving them so little of what's truly nurturing for them. And I really believe that movement is what really is the most nurturing and nutritious thing we can do for ourselves.
Yeah. And that's also permission, right? That there are these kind of cultural standards, I guess. Like keep your arms closed. If you move wildly, people stare at you. I mean,
Girls, keep your knees together. We still have that, right?
yeah,
From wearing skirts and from being proper young ladies. Culturally, it hasn't been so long that we're allowed to wear pants. It really hasn't. What, less than 100 years, I think, or
no, it's not.
something like that. So for us to open our legs as we're sitting, still, we're going against some cultural norm.
Yeah, definitely. I used to every time we used to fly a lot when I like to travel. So, but we'd go to the airport and I would walk or I would sit on the floor and just move a little bit because I was like, we're going to be sitting on a plane for 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, wherever we're going. And I'm like, I'm not going to sit still. I'm going to move. I'm going to get on the floor. I'm going to stretch. I'm going to keep moving. My son was, at a certain age, right? When he was young, he didn't care. He ran around and screamed and yelled and did it too. But at a certain age, he noticed people looking. Mom, don't do that. Mom, you're embarrassing. Mom, people are looking at you.
That's why I didn't have children.
But it's funny, he was aware that, oh, I have to act differently because everybody else wants me to act differently. They're not even saying anything. They're just gazing or looking or moving away or doing this weird, like, what do the eyes. It's just funny because we all teach each other that, right? Like,
Yes.
sit, don't get up, don't walk around, don't stretch, don't do a squat by your desk. God forbid, that's weird.
It's much more acceptable and normal to slouch,
Yeah.
and it looks weird when somebody's not slouching.
Right. What's acceptable?
I have
Yeah.
a series, Padma, and I invite you to send me if you want. I invite you to my series. It's called Yoga in Unusual Places, and I
Mhm.
take pictures of myself doing yoga at airports or at unusual places. Let's normalize
Yeah.
moving.
normalize doing funny things, walking down
The
down
supermarket.
it's like I'm just stretching my just stretching my arms. I love it. I know. It's great. All right.
Mm.
So I'm just looking at the time. We should probably
But we
um
both have interesting things coming up.
yeah,
So
let's talk
let's
about
share.
what we're doing and we'll put links below for what we're both doing. Sure. Sara Robledo, would you like to share? Waters, would you like to share what you're doing?
Sí, Padma Patricia Borrego. What's your second last name?
My second like my
Your
uh,
mother's.
Hansen.
Hansen.
Hansen. And then there was a lot of confusion. Okay, so my full name with confirmation name and my grandfathers and grandmothers, because he didn't know his father's last name for a long time. So he used his mother's last name and then he pulled in his father's last name. So it was like this whole Patricia, Raquel, Pascualita, Borrego, de la Cruz, Hansen. It
It's
became very complicated.
beautiful.
So
It's a poem. It is so lovely. You must sign your full name. Pascualita, you're the first Pascualita I meet in my life. How beautiful. Oh, so lovely. Okay, so I am starting a series, January 22nd, um, 6 class series for healthy backs,
mm,
holistic long-term solutions for healthy backs, whether it's people suffering from sciatica or low back pain, or they notice that their posture could use some improvement. So from this, multi-layered perspective, we will be working on healthy backs.
yay.
I'm starting. How about you, my dear?
I'm starting and this is a new thing for me, but it's a 21-day quantum body reset. And quantum for me means not huge, means little influences to make a big impact. So it is daily movement practice, small bite-sized movements, and they are therapeutic. My teachers mostly are somatic and Feldenkrais and developmental, and so that's my background with that. And then there's also just a little bit of like a sleep training, hormone training, nervous system training, really more just information about kind of tips on how to balance your system, how to balance your sleep, to balance your hormones, what regulation means or dysregulation, and how to recognize that. And then a cleanse, which is optional, but again, that just helps kind of reset the body. And these are the practices that I have used and continue to use on my own health journey, which has been more, not just the structural shattered arm, but autoimmune Lyme, couple autoimmune. So I've had a lot of success with um, these practices in dealing with more chronic issues. And so I'm wanting to share that with people as well, because it also helps with body pain.
Yes. Oh,
Yay.
so yummy, wonderful, so exciting, so good.
Yeah, so we'll put the links below, and it was such a lovely conversation, and we probably need to do another one because there's so we just scratched the surface.
Yes, yes, yes. Let's do it again. Let's do it again, my dear.
But yes, please take us up on it. We have a lot of experience and shared experience, and even though we're working separately, there is having this collaborative conversations really sparks, right? Studying with other people really sparks our inner work
Yes,
and allows us to serve people in a very different way, nourished way.
yes.